Chioma Okeke polished the gleaming marble floor, her reflection a tired blur against the opulence of the mansion. Being a maid for the city's most formidable billionaire, Damilola Adeyemi, was like living in another universe. He was a man made of ice and ambition, his voice sharp enough to cut glass, his presence a constant, heavy weight in the vast, silent rooms. He rarely spoke to the staff, and when he did, it was to issue a command, his gaze sweeping past them as if they were just another part of the decor. One afternoon, as Chioma was tidying the dining room, she heard a strange, strangled sound from the adjoining study. Peeking through the slightly ajar door, her heart leaped into her throat. Mr. Adeyemi was slumped over his desk, his face turning a terrifying shade of purple. Two figures in dark suits stood over him, their movements frantic. In a flash of panic, Chioma's mind screamed, "Assassins! They're attacking him!" Adrenaline surged through her. Without a second thought, she burst into the room. One of the men was trying to force something down Mr. Adeyemi's throat. She didn't hesitate. With all her might, she swung her fist, connecting squarely with the billionaire's jaw. The impact sent a jolt up her arm. Mr. Adeyemi gasped, a violent cough racking his body as a small, white pill shot out of his mouth and clattered onto the floor. Silence. The two men, who she now realized were his personal doctor and a bodyguard, stared at her, dumbfounded. Damilola Adeyemi slowly straightened up, his hand clutching his jaw, his eyes blazing with a mixture of shock and pure fury. You hit me," he rasped, his voice tight with disbelief. "Get out. You're fired. Get out of my house now." The words were like a slap. Humiliation washed over Chioma. She had tried to help, to save him, and now she was being thrown out like trash. Without a word, she turned and fled, the sound of his ragged breaths chasing her out the door. Back in her small, cramped apartment, the weight of her unemployment pressed down on her. Her younger brother, Emeka, looked up from his worn-out textbook, his bright eyes full of questions she couldn't answer. "Chioma, are you okay?" he asked. Her dream was to see him graduate, to give him a life beyond the crushing poverty of their neighborhood. But now, with no job, that dream felt more distant than ever. How could she have been so stupid? She had punched a billionaire. It sounded like a bad joke. Meanwhile, in the silent mansion, Damilola sat with his doctor. The throbbing in his jaw was a constant reminder of the bizarre incident. "That was an incredibly close call, Dami," the doctor said, his tone grave. "You were having a severe allergic reaction. Your throat was closing up. That punch, it was a crude version of the Heimlich maneuver. The jolt dislodged the pill you were choking on. It's not an exaggeration to say that Maid saved your life." The doctor's words hit Damilola harder than Chioma's fist. He had fired the woman who had saved him. He had screamed at her, humiliated her. A strange feeling, one he wasn't accustomed to, began to bubble up inside him. Guilt. But it was mixed with something else, curiosity. In a world where everyone either feared him or wanted something from him, this simple Maid had seen him in a moment of utter vulnerability and acted with raw, instinctual courage. He couldn't get her defiant, terrified eyes out of his mind. Days turned into a week. Damilola's life returned to its rigid schedule of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, but an unfamiliar disquiet lingered. The silence in his mansion felt different now, emptier. He found himself thinking about the fiery maid, the one who had the audacity to punch him and then disappear. He had to find her. It wasn't just about guilt anymore. It was a need to understand the person who had shattered his cold, controlled world with a single act of bravery. He tasked his security team with a new, urgent mission: find Chioma Okeke. It didn't take them long. They found her living in a rundown part of the city he never knew existed, struggling to find work, her pride a fragile shield against despair. The report detailed her hardship and her unwavering dedication to her younger brother. The next day, a sleek, black car, so out of place it looked like a spaceship, pulled up in front of Chioma's building. When Damilola Adeyemi stepped out, the entire neighborhood fell silent. Chioma saw him from her window, and her heart hammered against her ribs. She braced for another tirade, another humiliation. But when she opened the door, his expression wasn't angry. It was unreadable. "Miss Okeke," he began, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "There's been a misunderstanding. I was wrong. I want to offer you a job, not as a maid, as my personal assistant." Chioma was stunned into silence. Personal assistant? To him? Why? She managed to ask, her voice barely a whisper. Because, he said, his gaze intense, you don't see a billionaire. You just see a man. And you're not afraid to intervene. I need that. The offer was insane, but the desperation in her brother's hopeful eyes gave her the courage to accept. She needed this. Working as Damilola's assistant was a whirlwind of clashes and chemistry. They argued about everything, from his schedule to the way he treated his employees. She challenged him, refusing to be intimidated by his power or his temper. And to everyone's surprise, he listened. He found her honesty refreshing, her fierce spirit captivating. Beneath the arguments, an undeniable current flowed between them. He started smiling, a rare sight that made his whole face transform. He would find excuses to talk to her, asking about her brother Emeka, even arranging for a top-tier scholarship for him without telling her. But their budding connection did not go unnoticed. Damilola's fiancée, Tinny Johnson, a society princess who viewed their engagement as a business merger, watched with growing jealousy. She saw Chioma not as a person, but as an obstacle. Tinny began digging into Chioma's past, determined to expose the slum girl and put her back in her place. The opportunity came at Damilola's annual charity gala, the city's most prestigious event. Chioma, feeling out of place in a simple but elegant dress Damilola had insisted on buying her, was nervously trying to manage the event logistics. Suddenly, Tinny took the stage, a malicious glint in her eyes. I think it's time everyone knew who Damilola's new assistant really is, she announced, her voice dripping with venom. A giant screen behind her lit up with pictures of Chioma's impoverished neighborhood, her small apartment, and a falsified document suggesting she had a criminal record. Gasps filled the ballroom. Whispers turned into cruel laughter. Chioma stood frozen, the world tilting under her feet as hundreds of eyes bore into her, filled with scorn and judgment. She felt her carefully built new life crumbling into dust. Tinny's voice rang out. She's a nobody from the gutter who tricked her way into his life. But before Chioma could shatter completely, a strong hand took hers. It was Damilola. He walked her to the stage, his grip firm and reassuring, his eyes blazing not at her, but at the stunned crowd. He took the microphone from a shocked Tinny. You want to know who this woman is? He boomed, his voice silencing the entire room. This woman is Chioma Okeke. And yes, she comes from a world you all look down on. But what you don't know is that a few weeks ago, I was dying. And this woman, this nobody, saved my life. He turned to look at Chioma, his voice softening, filled with an emotion no one had ever heard from him before. She was the only person who didn't see the billionaire. She saw a human being in trouble. She acted with a courage I haven't seen in this room my entire life. She's not a nobody. She's the most somebody I've ever met. The crowd was utterly silent, their mockery replaced by awe. He then turned back to the audience, his gaze sweeping over them before locking onto Tinny. Our engagement is over. The finality in his tone was absolute. Then, still holding Chioma's hand, in front of the same people who had just mocked her, he looked into her eyes. Chioma, they say money can buy anything, but it can't buy courage, it can't buy kindness, and it can't buy a heart like yours. It was one punch that saved my life, but it's your spirit that has saved me every day since. I love you. Tears streamed down Chioma's face, but for the first time, they were tears of joy. In that moment, surrounded by the stunned elite, a poor maid and a billionaire proved that destiny isn't written by wealth or status, but by the brave, unexpected moments, and sometimes, even a single punch, that change everything. Thank you so much for watching our story unfold. If you were moved by Chioma and Damilola's journey, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more tales that will capture your heart. We'll see you in the next one.